If we choose between modern, not Chinese adventure motorcycles with 21-inch wheels, and I have ridden most of them, the new Transalp is the worst one for riding off-road. After a minute on the trail, I thought in my mind, what am I wasting my life on? Do I have to be riding here on a motorcycle that is just not suitable for it? There's not enough torque down there. The weight ratio is not balanced, having a heavy front, and the ergo doesn't work well for standing. The foot pegs have been moved forward, and in combination with both a too wide of a seat and having the plastic pargs under your legs makes it too uncomfortable to stand when you want to straighten the knees and move your weight back. The suspension is pretty harsh, but a little floaty at the same time. It took a little while to try to find a good setting for dirt, but unsuccessfully. It feels both hardy and bouncy at the same time. You don't feel any control. Unlike the traction control, which is one of the most obtrusive one you can find on an adventure motorcycle, having the lowest first setting, it interrupts smooth gravel riding and shuts the power every few seconds. As soon as your wheel loses even a fraction of its traction, for example like a bump, the bike goes crazy. And the traction control is going to interrupt any ride because it's enabled in all riding modes, with the only exception of the user one, but it's going to be turned back on later after ignition is turned off. So as a result, you just ride a jumpy motorcycle having completely disabled the traction control as soon as you see any minor uphill, otherwise you'll just stay down there. The Transalp also has the smallest ground clearance among all adventure bikes with 21-inch wheels. I tried to ride trails as slowly and diagonally as I could, but the bike touched the ground with its lower parts anyways, even with the highest preload setting. The only bike with a shorter ground clearance is the V-Strom 1050DE. Even here, the Transalp is not a king. The Transalp is just bad for off-road, trust me. I remember I wasn't that satisfied with the Desert X in my previous review, but Ducati's problems are nothing compared to the ones with the Transalp has. I said the Desert X required much skill to ride, but the bike was built for doing rallies, which most of its buyers will never do. But at least the Ducati excels in that riding style, while the Transalp doesn't shine from any off-road perspective. There is a popular opinion that if you don't have much skills, you can get something like this and just buy a more capable motorcycle when you get more off-road experience. And it might work with sports bikes, but not with adventure bikes. A newbie on a KTM EXC-F will already be able to break his bone jumping on it, while a newbie on a Transalp will still walk around his motorcycle holding it with his finger and saying he's learning to balance the bike. Or let's take a Tuareg as an example of a hardcore adventure bike. You just rode it off-road as a flow. The suspension, the wheels, the geometry, the engine, or whatever is under your wheels, you don't think with your brain, you just move with your reflexes. As Vin Diesel would say, you ride it with your heart. And this difference in ergonomics, suspensions, and brakes are noticeable as soon as the wheel hits simple and smooth dirt roads. A newbie will ride a hardcore Tuareg better because he doesn't have to fight the bike. While to get any joy with the Transalp, you definitely need some pre-learned and higher than average skills to compensate for the behavior of the motorcycle. So my summary here is, do not even dare think of buying the Transalp if you're going to train off-road or riding trails hard. And here I might ask you to push the like and subscribe buttons, but there is one thing. If we take a look at prices and filter out Chinese motorcycles, but wait, put the beamers back so we can actually see that the Transalp is closer to a V-Strom 650 XT rather than an 800DE, and it's even a little bit cheaper than a 750 GS. Technically, there still exists a KLR 650, which is cheaper than the Transalp, but it's not Euro 5 compatible, so it's not being sold in Europe, and it's also a thumper. It's a niche, outdated model that we probably just can ignore. So the problem is that the Transalp is being understood incorrectly because of its 21-inch wheel. 1917 would be a far better choice. Let's remember the first Transalps. There were a Rally NXR 750, an Africa Twin 650, a Transalp 600. The Africa Twin and the Transalp had similar performing engines, so what's the difference? Africa Twin 650 and 750 were serious off-road machines, while the Transalp was a much less hardcore but more versatile and rider-friendly vehicle, being better on pavement, lighter, and cheaper. And each new generation, Transalp become more road-oriented while being versatile and balanced. As it is right now, no one wanted to make a hardcore off-road Africa Twin killer. You can see it looking at small details and comparing the two motorcycles. The exhaust pipe moved up to the Africa Twin while it's set lower on the Transalp. Is it a coincidence? Honda thinks that a 230 kilogram bike is somehow a good off-roading tool, but let's be honest, Suzukis also live in their own universe where a liter adventure motorcycle weighs over 250 kilograms and a mid-sized one only makes 230. But if you compare the Transalp to the crossovers, it looks pretty decent. Its engine is better than any of the 650 or 750 cc's. The engine is also one of the smoothest ones, having a bearable level of vibration, so after a full day of riding the bike, you don't have your skin crawling in your hands. I also rode an 800DE and it was smooth, but the Transalp engine was smoother. Both motorcycles have similar engine configurations with two balance shafts. A Honda engineer explained it in a presentation. Suzuki has 90 degrees between the balancers, which makes the engine smaller, while Honda has 120, which fights the vibrations better. But I'm not sure that's a result of a single spec. Also, I often read a myth in comments that engines with two balance shafts are twice as smooth. Actually, the second one works as an addition. It often happens that a motor with a single balance shaft works smoother than a double shafted one. Or even a motor without any balance shafts might happen to be smoother than some competitors having shafts. Anyway, if we take a step away from adventure motorcycles, the Transalp engine is nice. It doesn't have a punch down low, but it's a smooth and decent motor without power delivery gaps, with decent in-city and on twisties as well as on highways. It's not a high revvy engine, it's more of a mid-revvy engine one, which is great for a road-oriented motorcycle. Also, it has good gearing, so each gear has decent speed range as for a mid-sized bike. You don't have to work that hard shifting gears in a city or riding canyons. The Quickshifter is decent. I would give it 4 points out of 5, but you expect better from Honda. For example, I liked that 800DE's Quickshifter better. Meanwhile, the Honda's one can quickshift from first to the second, which you usually should not do on most of the motorcycles. Here you just get a tolerable kick. On highways, where usually the lowest gear is the third one, the Quickshifter gets 5 out of 5. It is fast and smooth. Again, what motorcycle as a Quickshifter, at least as an option from 650cc to 750cc range? The 750GS? That one's Quickshifter is far not as good as this Honda's. The fuel economy is the same as the competition. The consumption often drops below 4 liters per 100 kilometers while riding mountains, but on average it's a little more than 4. On highways at 130 kilometers an hour, it drinks about 4.7 as the competition usually does. It probably won't make 400 kilometers on a tank, but it's close. It's a little bit better than what the Tuareg can do, but it's still not what the Tuareg and the 800DE show. A good surprise with the Honda was its sound. It was a surprise because manufacturers rarely care about how the motorcycle sounds except if they're Italians. The Transalp is not loud, but it sounds rich and full. For example, the V-Strom having the same 270 degrees sounds like a junky scooter, while the Transalp sounds like how a motorcycle should sound. When my destination was less than half an hour away, I didn't put earplugs in to enjoy the pleasant sound. Talking about the weight of the motorcycle, it's lighter than crossovers for the same price or below. The first impression was how light it felt even when I knew the weight numbers. You have to admit, Hondas did a good job working with weight and balancing here. Another thing that even the weight work doesn't let you enjoy off-road, but for beginners, especially those who are not tall, the low weight is a huge plus. Also, the Transalp is far more comfortable than crossovers or adventure bikes of the same price and below, especially if you're tall. None of the 650 or 750s can compete. Or, for example, the Tuareg cannot compete as well. Yes, it's better off-road, but we know that most of the adventure bikes' mileage is going to be done on pavement only. Or people ride places where you can ride your road bike and they say it was off-road. Most of the real-world buyers will like the Transalp more. Just to explain the comfort, the closest bike in terms of comfort is a liter V-Strom. It's definitely better than the Tuareg. It has decent wind protection. Not perfect, but still good enough considering it's a stock bike. The windscreen diffuses the airflow so you don't have any hard wind flow to your head and the helmet doesn't buff it. You cannot ride it fast having your visor open, but the ride feels quiet and the visor only got a few occasional flies after the trip. The Transalp also has a decent seat quality. I haven't seen anything better for the price range. I mean, the Benelli TRK 502 had an even more comfortable one, but we decided to just ignore the Chinese bikes for today. For example, the 800DE has a nice level of comfort in general, but the seat is too stiff if you would ask me. And we are, it's my video. Or looking from a different side, the Transalp seat is both wider and softer than the one on an Africa Twin. And the main thing, because I still think the Transalp is a good bike, is that I didn't feel any numbness being 188 centimeters or 5 foot 11 inches tall. And it was after a long and tiring summer grips over Spain. The weather temperature sometimes was over 40 degrees Celsius, and I did not have enough time to sleep because I had to get up early and ride as far as I could before noon. Oh, and one more thing, the Transalp having that big and colorful screen still doesn't think he has enough space to show me the weather temperature, unlike the coolant temp that occupied a good space on the dash. So every Honda rider knows his friend feels good and he's the right choice. I have to mention they do have a 1 out of 5 stars app that you can download to show the weather forecast, but it's not the same. So I like the seating position, especially compared to any 650 or 750 where you have to move your butt back and forth to find a better position while your knees are just sore. The Transalp is not like that. It's a different league in terms of comfort, and it doesn't even have that typical issue of Hondas when you should lean hard to reach the grips. Do you remember that I said that the pegs were moved too much forward? It's bad for off-road, but the knees don't get sore on pavement. It's also a good candidate to become the first bike for a tall guy, taller than 175 centimeters. The seating is comfy. You don't have to fight the overweight as on the V-Strom 800DE. You don't have to fight the too tall seat of the Tuareg. The engine is cool and friendly. The reliability, the liquidity are obvious. And the Transalp has one of the lowest compression ratios in the class. These days, you rarely see a brand new engine design on a 91 RON petrol. For those who consider only Japanese motorcycles, that's an important factor. For example, the 800DE having the same displacement has a 95 RON as its recommendation. Now let's go back to the suspension. If you compare it to 650s and 750s, you'll see it's not worse. First, you rarely get any adjustments on a crossover for the same price. Here, you get the preload. It's better than nothing. At first, I rode it on twisties and set the preload to the next to last position. I thought if I'm riding solo and my luggage is not heavy, that should be fine. After I almost crashed it on one of the first turns, I twisted the adjustment to the end, and then the motorcycle handled much better. You can feel it's a budget bike with big tubed wheels, but it honestly handles fine. At least not worse than cheap crossovers with no adjustments, or even better than 800 or 850 GSs, even if they have a electronic suspensions. Riding the Transalp on a well-paved twisty, sometimes you can even forget that you're riding an adventure motorcycle with long suspensions. But only until the pavement is smooth. Everything changes as soon as the road becomes wavy or has potholes. At the stiffest adjustment position, the fork can handle bumps fine, but not the shock. It starts jiggling a few times after hitting a bump. The first mod I would buy would be a shock upgrade as soon as they appear. It's not that expensive and the difference is worth it. But new riders might just accept how it is. Again, cheap adventure bikes rarely have suspensions that work well in any condition. The Transalp can handle broken pavement at least better than 650s or 750s. The suspension is longer, the wheels are bigger, as well as they're spoked, which helps. And here's a point where its ground clearance becomes the biggest one in the price-filtered competition. And the same goes for the brakes. It's enough if you compare the bike to the 650cc competitors, but I like to have more feedback. It would be great if the engine performance was matched with decent brakes, but unless you believe in miracles, it's not compliant. Oh, and I did ride 2 Transalps, but both gray, so you probably didn't really notice the difference. Both of them had the same spongy suspension as well as uninformative braking feedback. The only thing it might need to fit a long trip is cruise control. Fortunately, it at least has an electronic throttle, so it's light enough, it's comparable to the 650 class. No motorcycle cheaper than the Tuareg has a cruise control, neither the Tuareg nor a V-Strom. A 750GS might get some as an extra, having it as one of the 2 perceptible advantages, but having a cruise control on the motorcycle already is pricier than the Transalp and closer to an 800DE. Just for my curiosity, I took a look at what a 1-year-old GS can buy in Spain, and only 30% of them had the cruise control. A second advantage of a 750GS is the seat height. If you do compare it to the Transalp to a crossover class, it's a little bit too tall. While compared to the 21-inch adventure motorcycle seats, it's one of the lowest. A Tuareg is much taller. A KTM 890 is much lower, but much pricier. A 790 is built in China, so I'm not sure people considering the Japanese bike would also like to get a Chinese device with a mediocre, reliable reputation. An 800DE might have the same height, but as soon as you apply the same suspension adjustments, the Suzuki will be taller. I tested both of them at the same time and I did feel the difference. The Tuareg is the opposite. Technically it's a taller bike, but because of its narrower seat, you can reach the ground as confidently as on the Transalp, maybe even better. But again, if you type Honda Transalp 750 versus in YouTube, it will show you a list of motorcycles which real people compare it to. All the most popular search requests are comparisons with other Japanese motorcycles. And however great a Tuareg is, it doesn't matter how many good things people say about it, there are enough people who consider only Japanese machines, and the Transalp is the shortest among them. And by the way, even though it is still being built in Thailand, it is still much more reliable than Chinese or European.